This week's lesson is on comprehension strategies, and these strategies are about helping you understand what you read, so let's get rocking. The first strategy is predicting, and it is something you do before you read mostly. You can also do it during your reading, but for short text especially, you predict before you read everything. So what you do is preview the text first, which means read the title, look at the pictures, and read the first paragraph. And then you use that information, plus whatever you already know about the topic, to make an educated, so a thoughtful guess about what it's going to be about or what will happen. It's important that you have evidence to support your predictions. So something like, this is going to happen because, and you would say something that you already knew or something that the first paragraph or the title or the pictures told you, so that your prediction makes sense. And lastly, in predicting, it's important to confirm your prediction when you're done reading. You have to ask yourself if you were right or not to help make sure that you were on the right track. So let's look at a text. And we'll preview it and get our predictions. This is called The Civil War Begins. There's the title. And I'm already thinking, I know what the Civil War was about. It was about the North and South and slavery. Even if I didn't know what the Civil War was, I know what war is. So people are going to fight. There's going to be battles. There's always a reason for a war. And so that may be part of what's going on here. Then I'll look at the pictures. I've got a soldier's cap there, and then a man with a cannon. And the cannon tells me that this war is not happening today because we don't use cannons anymore. So I've got some background information. I'm going to read the first paragraph and then make some predictions. Although the United States was less than 100 years old, it was a troubled country. The South's income came mostly from farming, especially cotton farming. Cotton was cheap to grow if enslaved people worked the fields. The North's income came from businesses that did not use slavery, including banks and railroads. Because the states could not agree on slavery and other things, they went to war. So I'm going to make some predictions, and when I do, I'm also going to give evidence of why I think this is what's going to happen. So the first one, I think this passage will be about how people felt about slavery. And why do I think that? The last sentence says that they went to war because they couldn't agree on it. And if you don't agree on something, you have certain feelings about it. So that's why I think that the rest of the passage might talk about how the North thought about slavery and how the South felt about slavery. Another prediction, a very different one, is the passages will be about the differences between the North and the South. Why do I think that? The middle of the paragraph tells how the North and South made money differently. The North had businesses like banks and railroad. The South was all about cotton farming. So the paragraph could go in that direction and talk about comparing and contrasting the North and the South. So we'll come back to these at the end and see if I was right about any of them. Another strategy is to ask questions while you read. Now, these are not like test questions. It's like questions that you have in your head about whatever the topic is. So they help you think deeply about what you read. And it tells you, this is important, it tells you if you are confused or interested in the text. So if you're having questions while you read, it may be because it's something that you think is really cool or that you don't know about. And so you have all these questions about how does it work, what's going to happen. Or you might be confused. If you have a question, it could be because you're not understanding what you're reading. Either way, it focuses you and helps you to get more out of the text. So ask questions before you read also so you can look for the answers. And this is a great one for concentration. If you have a few questions before you read about something, it'll help you to concentrate and remember what you're reading. So this is a good one to use when you do have tests. You can either look at the test questions before, or you can still think of your own just to make sure that you're paying attention while you read. And sometimes you're going to find more questions as you keep reading. You may answer some of yours, but it might make some other ones as you go. That's okay too. It's all about thinking deeply. So here's our story again, and I'm not going to read any more yet because we're still previewing. So we've done the title, the illustrations, and the first paragraph. And I'm going to use what we've learned through here about the North and the South and slavery and about their businesses to make some questions to help me focus when I finally get to where I read the whole thing. So here's one question. Why was it cheaper to use slaves? It said that cotton was cheap if they used enslaved people. So why? What made that so much cheaper? Because if you own slaves, don't you have to feed them and give them houses and clothing and stuff? That seems expensive to me. Another one, why was slavery around in the first place? We know today that it's wrong and it's bad, so why did it even start? If there wasn't a slavery, there wouldn't have been a war. And who started the war? Was it the North or the South? We'll find these answers at the end after we've read the paragraph. We've got one more strategy before we do that, though, and it is connecting, which is thinking about how the text is similar to something in your life, in the movies and books, in your community, and in the world. We've talked about text to self, text to text, and text to world before. This is just a little bit more simpler way of saying it. You can make connections anytime while you're reading, before, during, and after. And connections are important because if you can make connections, you know you've understood something correctly. And connections to something you already know help your brain remember things as well. So one more time with the story. This time, when we make connections, we're actually going to get to read the whole thing, and we are going to code it while we're at it, another focusing tool. So pause the video, read through the whole thing, then we'll go through the coding. So, when you read the title, you might think that the topic would be war, but there's actually only one word war in the whole thing. The topic is actually states. And that's the one that comes up the most. So something about the states. The main idea is next. We're not going to do signal words. There's no signal words in here. And the main idea is in the first paragraph, but it is not the first sentence. The main idea is right there. They could not agree on slavery, so they went to war. And then last, underline the relevant information. I underline stuff about the North's income and the South's income, about how they argued, and how they were afraid that slavery is going to be illegal, so the South took 11 states and formed their own country, while the rest of them stayed with the Union. So now let's make some connections. So here's my first connection. I connected to my life, and it said, I believe that slavery is morally wrong. My belief system is part of my life, and slavery just is. It's wrong, and so that connects to me pretty powerfully. Here's one from other books. I've read a book by James McPherson called The Battle Cry of Freedom, and it's basically the history of the Civil War. And he says that the South thought that slavery was good for African Americans, that they liked it, and that it was the only way that they could lead a stable life, which obviously I don't agree with because of my connection up here. But it helped me understand this paragraph because I've already read other places where that's been said. So I know that that's a true thing, even though it's not something I agree with. Then I have one to the world. People in government, because this was a lot about government when I talked about in the paragraph how states wouldn't join the United States unless slavery was still there. And when Lincoln was elected, he's part of the government. They were afraid slavery was going to be made illegal. So my connection to the world is that people don't often agree on things in government. And today's examples are the healthcare issues and immigration issues. People feel very strongly one way or the other, and sometimes it leads to... Yeah, remember those questions from the beginning? Here they are. My 3 questions, and let's see if we could find the answers to them. Why was it cheaper to use slaves? The text doesn't say. Sometimes that happens. I would still like to know, but I'll have to look somewhere else for it. The other one, why was slavery around in the first place? That one got answered. 5 of the colonies insisted on it in order to become part of the United States, so they let them go through with it. And who started the war? That one was answered. The South, because they formed their own country. They forced the North to go to war. And if you remember the predictions earlier, one of them I said was that I predicted that the passage would talk about how people felt about slavery. I can't confirm that one because that wasn't really what it was about. It was more about how slavery brought war on. So that wasn't true. And my other prediction about it being about the differences between the North and the South, that one wasn't correct either because it didn't talk anymore about the differences. That's okay because it still prepared me to read. Even though I wasn't correct, it still got me thinking and helped me understand what I was reading then. So that's all. Stay tuned on the next slide for the challenge.